Wrobleski. All right. Craig Wrobleski, you're the cinematographer of 2 FX shows, Fargo and Legion, just to name a few things that you work on. Both shows you're working with Noah Hawley, and they're so completely different. Talk a little bit about Legion first, because that's the hot new show, so to speak. You shot 3 episodes of that. Talk a little bit about the aesthetic approach to that show.
Well, I came in on episode 4 of Legion, and Dana Gonzalez had shot the first 3 episodes. And Noah is very precise and very specific in how he approaches his work, and his approach to Legion was no different. He had a very comprehensive visual document created, and as well as worked very closely with Michael Wiley, the production designer, and Dana, to establish the look of the world of Legion for the first 3 episodes. So when I came in, the world had been very firmly created, and it was an incredible playground to work in. I mean, Michael Wiley's sets are just incredible, and Noah had given us a lot of rope to work in this world and to create unique visuals, you know, always serving story and character, of course, because that's always the priority with Noah's work, as it should be. But the world we played in was just amazing.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because you did sort of the same thing in Fargo. You came in the 2nd season, and you've been there ever since. As a cinematographer, how do you adapt your style to a show that's already kind of established itself, while at the same time, I guess, giving it a unique mark for your episodes?
Well, it's one of my favorite things about my job is going in and sort of rebooting my head each time, and getting immersed in these new worlds, and kind of finding my way through it, and serving and honoring what's already been done, but also finding my own spin on things. And, you know, the beauty of Noah's work, and especially a show like Legion, where every episode was so distinct, and a show like Fargo, where every season is distinct. I mean, there's no real carry through between seasons of Fargo. There's certainly loose threads that connect it together, but in terms of the visuals, every season is a new invention. So it's a lot of fun to just go in and just immerse in that world, and it's a good challenge to kind of shed your preconceptions and your default thinking, and go into it with fresh eyes, and really bring a new approach to it, and learn about it as you go. I mean, it's like moving to a new city. You know, you move in, and then you sort of find out what works for you and what's cool, and learn to live there. It's pretty great.
What's so interesting about Legion is that it's within the superhero universe of X-Men, but it's so unique from any superhero show or film that we've ever seen. I mean, there's some really trippy visuals in this, for lack of a better descriptive. Can you talk a little bit about the distinct style of the show in context with other superhero properties?
Well, when I was approached about doing Legion, and, you know, full disclosure, I'm not very steeped in the lore of superhero and the Marvel universe. I mean, I've seen a lot of the films and really enjoyed them, but I'm by no means an aficionado of that world. And when I was approached about doing Legion, I had to think about whether I wanted to kind of immerse myself in that world, or whether I wanted to bring a fresh approach to it. And I knew that Noah would bring a fresh approach to it. I mean, he certainly immersed himself in the world, but I always know that Noah brings a new approach to all the work he does. So I purposely made a choice to not immerse myself in the world of Legion and get too many preconceived notions about the Marvel universe and how the show should look, and decided instead to just immerse myself in the world that had been created, and not focus as much on what had been done, or what I thought, you know, was the preconceived idea of what a superhero show should be. And certainly, as we all know, Legion did not play into any preconceptions about what a superhero show should be. and you know, that was a lot of fun, and it was great to be able to take that approach and not feel like there was a pressure to recreate what's been done in the past. We certainly honored a lot of the visual motifs of superhero, and but selectively. We didn't decide like this should look like this should look like that. It was all an amalgamation of a lot of different influences, and I think that's what makes the show so interesting.
Well, it's a very dark show, both tonally and visually. I mean, some of it is almost like a horror movie or a film noir or mystery thriller. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Noah's an aficionado of films and has an encyclopedic knowledge of films, and is just an incredible storyteller. So he brought so many different influences to it. I mean, you can see it in the production design. You can see the influences of Kubrick and other filmmakers. And then in terms of the approach, I mean, an episode like episode 7, which is not, I didn't shoot episode 7, but you can see it's like a full-on horror movie, and then it turns into a silent film. And so it's sort of, there's the beauty of working with Noah is that there's a big target, but the bullseye is very small. So when you're working with him, you have to be very careful to understand what target you're aiming at, and then understand where the bullseye is. And he brings in influences from every possible genre, but it always has to serve story and character. I mean, we could never do anything just because it was cool, or just because it was something we wanted to try. It always had to be thought through, and that's a great process for a filmmaker to go through, is to be put through that rigor, and to say, okay, this has to serve story and character, and can't be it can't be something that is just cool.
Of the episodes that you shot, which was one that you thought really stood out for you visually or story-wise?
Well, it was interesting. They were all so different. I mean, I shot episodes 4, 6, and 8, and 4 is a bit of a detective story, with the team out trying to find more about David's past. So in terms of scope and scale, I really liked 4 because it felt like a real journey, and also 4 culminated with that great montage between the fight with Carrie and D3 in the woods, and then Carrie in the lab, feeling every blow and every impact, and then Oliver dancing in the ice cube, and Sid facing down with the eye. Like, it's just, there was so many elements, and it was such a great piece of choreography to work on and shoot. So I really liked that episode. I mean, episode 6 was so unique in that it was essentially a retelling of episode 1 from Sid's point of view. So it was fun to play with those visual mnemonics for the audience of scenes they know they'd seen before but were slightly different. So it brought in that uncanny aspect, which was a really critical part of Noah's thinking, was the notion of the uncanny, and to make episode 6 very uncanny in terms of the audience going, I've seen this before, but it seems different. And playing with that notion of reality was a lot of fun. And then episode 8, the finale, was just a culmination of everything. I mean, there was a lot of questions from people asking, how is this show going to finish? Like, how do you wrap up a show like this? and to work on episode 8 and see how it was all tied together, and to be able to make that happen. And it was a thrill. So, I mean, I think they were all unique in their own way. I do have to say I'm a little biased towards episode 4, because I really liked the scope and scale of it, and the sense of journey that we had with the characters.
Lots of very surreal images in all of those episodes too. I mean, kind of like Hieronymus Bosch paintings, or stuff right out of David Lynch. I wonder if that's coming up with those surreal images where you guys looked for influence.
Oh, very much so. It was part of the joy of working on the show, was being able to draw on all these disparate influences. I mean, on episode 6, for example, Hero and I, the director, we really latched onto the idea of the notion of horror as presented in a movie like The Shining. The Shining is an absolute pure horror movie, but it's so bright and everything is in plain sight. So all the terror is right there. You're not hiding it in shadows, it's just there. And Mulholland Drive was another influence for episode 6. Just the surreal aspects, and the notion of what is real and what isn't real, and what is a fabrication in someone's mind. Mm-hmm. And like paintings by Francis Bacon, those notions of distortion, and it was all, we could draw on so many things. And like I said, it was I brought up an analogy with someone I was speaking to about it, and I said, it's like you get this massive toy chest and you open it up and there's like 500 toys in there, but there's only one that you actually want to play with. And that's what the prep process was finding the one toy that you wanted to play with. And then it was the same with influences, looking at all these different influences, but also distilling it down to what was the right influence and what felt right, and wasn't, again, just doing something that was cool, that, just for that sole reason. I mean, it was cool and we loved doing it, but it had to be right and couldn't bump the audience out or take them in a direction where we didn't want to go.
Let's talk a little bit about season 3 of Fargo, and I think I'm still under embargo for certain episodes, so I have to tread lightly here. Having worked on the second season and the third season, what were some of the major aesthetic differences between the two?
Well, Fargo is, every season is a complete reboot in terms of where we're at, and season 2 was set in 1979, so that obviously has an aesthetic that comes with it in terms of the sets, the wardrobe, the vehicles, and also the approach that we took when Dana set up the season. We used vintage lenses, and we worked with a color palette that was full of browns and golds and all those tones that we associate with the 70s, without ever being kind of stereotypical about it. I mean, we wanted to present the reality of what the 70s were like, not the strictly flared collars and bell bottoms kind of thing, because the 70s was about a lot more than that, especially 1979, when it was towards the tail end, it was starting to become something else. And then season 3 of Fargo set in 2010, so it's a very different world. And I know in my photography I tried to take a slightly more contemporary approach to the lighting, to make it feel different than 1979. In 1979, my lighting approach was a little more overt and a little more, how they would have, to some extent, how they would have lit movies in the 70s, where the lighting was a little more specific and a little more, it was just a different time for filmmaking in terms of what the technology was. So shot things slightly differently. And then in 2010, it was a little more contemporary in terms of lighting the spaces and, taking a more of a modern approach to the photography, and also with the tools. We shot season 3 of Fargo, 2.8K resolution, whereas season 2 was shot essentially 1080 resolution. So, there's a difference there aesthetically in terms of the clarity of the images, and the different lenses we used and all those things just help to create those subtle differentiations.
One of the things that the movie did, and that each season of the show has done very well, is use the environment, all of that snow. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys use the environment visually in the show?
Well, the environment is a character in the show for certain. I mean, the reality, and I know this from living in Alberta in Canada, we get some pretty good winters, and the winter becomes a defining element in how you live your life. I mean, weather plays a role, and the environment plays a role in how your day's going to go. When you get up in the morning and you realize, it's -20 Celsius, I don't even know what that is in Fahrenheit, it's cold. When you get up and that's what you're faced for the day, it affects your whole day in terms of how much you're going to get done, how you'll move around. It's one of the great visual things that I really think Fargo embraced, and I know this as a Canadian, is just how awkward winter is. When you leave the house, you got so much gear on, you're just sort of moving differently, and you're everything's sort of clunky and clumsy, and you're bumping into things because you got these boots on that make your feet 1.5 times the size they really are. And and Fargo did a great job, I thought, in season 1 of really setting that up, because you realize how cumbersome and awkward winter is, and how it defines so many elements of how you live your life. So, I mean, the environment does play a huge role in the show, and it's important also to make these characters, to put them in their environment, and sometimes to just reinforce how small they are in their environment. These These are just regular people trying to live their lives that are caught up in events that are larger than themselves. And the visual element of that can be supported by placing them in these environments where they are diminished and they are, you know, a bit out of their element, so to speak.
Right, and the show is very darkly funny at times too. I mean, even in moments of horrible violence. Can you talk about visually balancing those two extremes?
Well, it is really important to thread that line. I mean, the Coen brothers' whole style it walks so many lines between all these elements. It never really tips too far one way or the other, you know. And for example, whenever we're doing a stunt sequence, we have to be very careful that, you know, we always say we can't make this stunty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can't shoot it in a way that makes it seem like real whiz-bang stunt work. It has to be presented. It's like the car wreck in The Big Lebowski, you know, when he drops the joint in his lap and the whole car stunt is played out in a wide shot where you see him swerve down the road and he hits the dumpster.
Right.
That's kind of the standard for how we approach stunt work. Is, you know, we have to be very careful to not overdo it and not make it too cutty and too stunty, like we said. And also point of view is very important, you know, how we approach that. I mean, in episode 2 of Fargo, which is already aired, you know, when Ray's car gets T-boned by Cy, you know, we made a point of always presenting that from a point of view that was either Ray's point of view or kind of an omniscient point of view, and not really placing the camera in ways that made it, you know, too stunty or too like whiz bang. You know, it had to be presented in a way that is just kind of presentational. It all plays into the true story notion of Fargo, where this is what's happening. We're going to present it to you in a way that presents it as a true story, not in a way that's overly editorial or tips our hand in terms of how we shoot it towards, you know, like towards something that's too overt, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. Yeah. Well, Craig, thank you so much, and congratulations on all your work this year. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure talking with you. Any other questions or anything, please let me know.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks. You